Hello, this is Elizabeth West. We are broadcasting from the Business Travel Show Europe. I have with me today Caroline Strachan, CEO of Festive Road. We've done our state of the industry research at BTN, and you were a part of that very intensive interview process that we undertook for that research. And one of the things that we talked about during that interview was the state of innovation and how travel programs are approaching innovation today. And I think it's quite interesting. One of the things that we've seen is the willingness to take a global program that has been globally consolidated for decades, potentially, and to see them carving out pieces to push towards innovation. Can you tell me a little bit about why the carve-outs are happening and how then the innovation gets wrapped into a global program? I think it's a stopper for a lot of programs to say, I globalized. I can't break that apart now. But we do see companies doing it.
Yeah, I think this is exactly what we call the buyer quandary of scale versus innovation.
Yeah.
And this is not to criticize any one player, but it's hard to deliver innovation at scale. It's hard to take a new something and deliver it across multi-market. It's much easier to run at pace in one country. I think buyers have understood that for a number of years, but they've just become impatient. And so the conversation we will have is, what is more important to you, global consistency or the ability to bring some form of innovation into your program? So if you're responsible for a global program, the market you tend to pull out first is the US. And for all the reasons all of us know, right? One currency, one set of key vendors, etc. And so I think that's the early stage of deglobalization that we're seeing at a travel program level. Is if we're going to pull one market to test an innovation to help us run faster, maybe not even for the rest of world, why would we hold back one market for global consistency? We've also seen that some may take the US out plus one other market or two other smaller markets to test in those. And it's normally really small markets of 20 travelers or something if it's outside the US. So I think, for years now, there's been this, we must globalize. It's like we've reached the peak of globalization. And now buyers are willing to uncouple that. Now, what comes with that is why did you globalize in the first place? Consistency, control, the speed of messaging. If you needed to change a policy, you could do it within a couple of hours, maybe. It's like those things have matured now and we're past that.
It's interesting. We're past that. I think some companies can kind of look past that. I think the question of the data and how then to reconcile the data if you've got platforms in the U.S. that aren't operating in other geographies. Are we at a point with data and normalization of data and manipulation of data that we can bring those together in a way that is worth analyzing?
Yes.
Yeah. Is that it? That's an easy answer for me.
I mean, it really is an easy answer. And interestingly, when we think about travel or meetings programs, we think about what's the key foundation stone. And for years, that would have been the meeting planning agency or the TMC. Now, for some, actually data is their core foundation stone. And they still need a TMC and they still need meeting planning agencies. But imagine data becoming the foundation stone and you layer all of the other services required on top of that. And then when you do that, the core of the program starts to shift, because then everything becomes data focused of the service needs to be what the service needs to be, as long as we can collate this amount of data. So we do have some clients that have data as a foundation stone. Interestingly, we have one who has the traveller profile as the foundation stone.
That's it. They're talking my language.
Yeah, so that's a really different start point. And I think if we'd have been having this chat 5 years ago, we wouldn't have been able to talk about different foundation stones. And that's just down to the pace of change from a technology perspective of what's possible.
When you talk about foundation stones, you start to then build some different models, right? You have a certain foundation stone and you build a model around that. And then if you have a choice, that can be exciting. I don't see a lot of companies going down this path. And I think 5 years ago, we were saying, there was a buzzword, microservices, whatever, architecture program. I don't see a lot of companies doing that. Are those still words that we should be using? I still think most travel managers want a solution.
So that's fascinating because I guess one of the difficulties in your kind of role is that you hear about all of the latest things, right?
Right.
But one of the things I think I've learned in this role is timing is everything.
Yeah.
And so you hear of those pioneers, those leaders, those innovators who are out front, and maybe there's one example of it, but it's hard. It's hard to go and we think of it as buy, partner, build. So the buy is, I need a fully baked solution. I'm going to go and buy those software and services from whichever providers. That's a buy solution, and that's really valid right now for the majority of travel programs. There are others that have said, as we were just talking about foundation stones, and I'm going to sort of craft my own. We call that a department store. Imagine you're walking into a department store and you say, I want this concession there, this concession there. And that helps the travel buyer go into more of a control around their own innovation roadmap by placing those together. And then there are those that have gone beyond that and they've really gone to build. And they normally partner with a player to do that. Right. But that's not a quick
that's
win.
The PwC
you need
journey.
You need real ambition to. So we talk about the will, the skill, and the build. So you need real ambition to do it. You need the skill. You need the capability of a lot of travel teams are not coders or developers or tech guys, right? Tech guys or gals. But you also need the budget to do it. So it's hard being one of those companies that are out front building that. But if there is enough of a business case, they'll absolutely go after it. You just won't have heard about it for a while because they're busy building. Right. And so I do really still see that as a valid option, but it just depends on what resources you've got, what budget you've got, what ambition level you've got, versus what's happening in the market. Because at the same time, the market as a whole is developing. Right. So we have to consistently and constantly sit with our customers saying, right, hang on, actually a really valid strategy for you could be to be a fast follower. So let these other companies that have got the resources and the budgets go for it, and then you're going to benefit by being a fast follower. So a small prediction moment, I guess. I think if I was to look ahead 5 years and we're back sat here again chatting, we will see the fast followers having really reaped the benefit. And so the fast followers will then be managing travel in a different way, and then they'll maybe be encouraging those behind them to think about it differently.
More well-defined pathways to get where the followers, not the fast followers, but the eventual followers want to go.
And that's not to say any
totally
one
valid, right?
Absolutely. No one path is invalid.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. So I know we spoke last night casually about the corporate travel department and the possible sort of resurgence or more interest in that kind of structure. Is that something that you see as realistic?
Yeah, I think it's always been a valid option. Again, it comes back to what matters most to the company. And our big driver is really, so we get the call a lot of the time, this bit of my program isn't working, can you help us change it out for an alternative? Yeah. And our answer to that is always, hang on a minute, let's just take a few steps back and work out really what your strategy is as a company, and then link your travel program to that strategy. We have a study that we're not quite ready to release yet, but I'll give you one quick stat from it. That across and this was 10 billion worth of travel program spend. There was a lot of really meaty programs in there. Only 10% of the travel programs are linked directly into the company strategy. Right. So that gives us, there's a huge opportunity to really go after that. Once you know that, you can then work out, is CTD a valid option for you? Is buying off the shelf a valid option for you? Or are you going to have to create a department store or build something yourself? So I think that's one of the gorgeous things about being in 2025, right? There are just so many options. And I feel for the buyer community, because I think at times it can be, okay, right, hang on a minute, this has changed.
Yes.
There used to be one option and I would go out to bid and I would look for a TMC or an OBT. Whereas now there feels like there's a lot of option. And so sometimes buyers can struggle navigating that.
And I also think there are more options, but they are less definitive. So the decision making is harder. And I think that has stymied a number of travel managers out there, but that's not the end of the story. I don't want to end on a negative note, but that's more to come. And I do think that there's a lot of opportunity out there. Caroline, thank you so much for joining me.